a pleasure to have everyone here. And of course, we want to acknowledge our host, the Mary Hytken Dumont Jewish University here at Anshei. We remember Mary Dumont each year and her generosity to our congregation. We have an exciting series this time, a four-part series, 4 lenses on the Bible. We know that there are many ways of looking at the Bible, and as we put on lenses, we do always wear a different lens. When you're wearing, if we had an ophthalmologist here, perhaps they could explain that you wear certain lenses, you see certain things better. You wear other kind of lenses, you see other things better. So it depends, what are we looking for? So before we begin looking at the lens through which Rashi looks at the Torah, let me ask you a general question. If you were writing a commentary, what would be generally some of the purposes of writing a commentary? Just generally speaking, what are the options?
Translating some of the words.
So right, there's words. The most narrow question is, what does the word mean? Period. Good. Many people are very much philologically oriented. They want to know what the words mean, and that's the most narrow purpose of it, but a very important purpose. If you don't know what the words mean, you can't get anywhere. What else?
You want to fill gaps and correct discrepancies.
Okay, filling gaps is interesting. Many people describe Midrash as doing that, filling gaps. There's stories that not enough information, right? And you have too much information, then there's not enough information, which often in the Bible you have. So you want to fill that in either by tightly figuring out what the text is implying, or by supplying outside sources of tradition like Midrash. What else? What was the second thing you said?
Correct discrepancies.
Right, to deal with contradictions.
Yeah.
Contradictions, right? Especially, Breuer has this idea that the whole Torah is like a one big Rambam that's just full of contradictions, and it's our job to figure them out, and that's where all the brilliance lies.
Explain why something is in the Torah, why it's important enough to be written there.
Okay. So now we're getting to something else, and that may relate to the Ramban, the broader lens of what's the purpose of it to begin with, right? Okay. What do you mean by purpose?
Well, we're told that every word is important in the Torah, so why did they use this word rather than that? Why did they tell the story altogether?
Right. Now, this question of looking at as if every word is very important, that leans toward the Midrashic view. Generally speaking, that would lean toward the Midrashic view. The Midrashic view is that every word is significant. If you can't explain the word, then that may give me a right to get very fanciful about what the interpretation might be. But there are some modern literary people who also would say that as well, that every word is important. After all, they wrote it must have some significance. Come on in. So, we want to know, what lens does Rashi use when he's looking at the Bible? What is he trying to accomplish? So the purpose of Rashi's commentary, in his own words, then we'll try to characterize what lens is he using to what end? What is his purpose? What is his goal? Now, I'm a student in some ways of Rabbi Chaim Soloveitchik, Dr. Chaim Soloveitchik, and he was a big believer that you shouldn't take people at face value. In other words, if someone writes in their introduction that this commentary's purpose is to do X, Y, and Z, that has absolutely no validity. The question is, what do they do in their commentary? Not what they want to do in their commentary. What do they do in their commentary? Especially if they wrote the introduction before they wrote their commentary. But even if they wrote it afterwards, what people claim to be doing is not always what they are doing. Rashi is of a school they're not such sophisticates they're going to have an introduction. He's a Rebbe, he wants to start learning. There's no introductions. You get right to it. So we open with the first verse. So there are no introductions, but here and there, Rashi digresses and tells us what his purpose, what his stated purpose is. So let's read that in Genesis 3:8. So he says in Genesis 3:8, and it's also in Genesis 37. He states what he claims is the purpose of his commentary. So who would like to read that for us? Genesis 3:8.
I'll be glad to.
Thank you, Phil.
There are many agadic in Russia, and our sages already arranged them in their proper order in Genesis Rabbah and other in the Rashi. But I have only come to teach the simple meaning of the scripture. Says Agad, that clarifies the words of the verses, each word in its proper way.
So it's a very packed kind of a statement here. Let's look at it and make it carefully. Firstly, he says there are many Aggadic midrashim. There are two words. Agadah, it's like the word Haggadah, meaning like stories. And then there's midrash. Midrash are also stories, interpretation stories, usually related to the Bible. And when it's in the Talmud, it's called Agadah. When it's in a separate book, it's usually called midrash. For instance, you have those books right there next to the blue set. Those are some of the books of midrash. You have some over there. There's the Midrash Rabbah, the great book of midrash. So he says, if you want midrash, you open the Midrash Rabbah. I don't need to redo the Midrash Rabbah for you. So if you want midrash, there are other books. Tanchuma, Birkei Eliezer. There are different books that contain midrash. Go in the Talmud, there are pages and pages of Agadah stories, and we can get them. So I'm not here to do that. Now it turns out that much of his commentary is culling from the midrash, but he says, I'm not here to simply restate the midrash. So what does he come to do? You tell me. What is he coming to do? The simple meaning of the scripture. Now, when you say that something is contradictory, it's hard to understand what it means. There are a lot of different possible meanings of the word. Word is very obscure. To say the simple meaning is not so simple, right? To get to the simple meaning, people have been arguing about the simple meaning of the text for thousands of years. They'll probably continue to do so for many thousands of years. So it's not so simple. But then he says, give me the simple meaning of the scripture. And, so there are two purposes. His purpose is the simple meaning, not the midrashic meaning, and such agadah, if there's midrash, that clarifies the words, each word in its proper way. So I'll take simple meaning. Purpose number one, I've got to get the simple meaning. He created the field called the simple meaning. He didn't even know what it was. He had to figure it out. He's going to get criticized that he didn't do a good job. And then he says, but I also have a second purpose. If I can fit a midrash in, I'll take it. I can fit it. Now, what would it mean for midrash to fit in?
There's a simple shot that you can offer.
Right. So one way to say it is, what is this? It's a chair. What is this thing? So if I've got a question, like it's wrinkled over here, if there's a problem, then I can say, well then, once it's a problem, then I can offer a new interpretation. It's not a chair. I can say it's a bed. All I need is a problem in the text, and that allows me to jump off, and I can be as fanciful as I want, as long as I have a justification. You want me to just give a simple meaning, but there's a wrinkle over here in this text, so the wrinkle justifies any kind of fanciful thing. So you say, wait, I thought you were giving this simple meaning. He says, well, simple meaning. I'm trying to give a simple meaning, and I don't know what this word means. You can't explain this phrase. So if you can't explain it, then you might as well use the midrash. So is he there to give the simple meaning of the text? Yes and no. At that point, he's not giving the simple meaning anymore. So, by the way, there's an expression that's used, davar davur al ofnav. It doesn't say proper way. It says everything on its wheels, or something like that. Like everything sitting on its wheels, something like that. Okay. So if that's his purpose, to explain, to give the simple meaning, how do you explain a simple commentary like the one we'll have in a few weeks, Parshat Vayeshev, about Joseph and his brothers? Let's take a look at what he says. Let's read the verse in Genesis 37, read the Rashi, and then let's take an example of what in the world is Rashi doing in this commentary. Again, we're not going to take him at face value that what he says he's doing is what he's doing. Let's see what he actually does. So first, the verse. Who would like to read that for us? The verse.
This then is the line of Jacob. 17 years of age, Joseph tended the flocks with his brothers as a helper to the sons of his father's wives, Bilhah and Zilpah, and Joseph brought bad reports of them to their father.
Now the problem is, it says, this is the line of Jacob. The line, that's a fancy translation. You could say the stories, you could say the children, and if you say line, then we've got a problem. It says, this is the line of Jacob. Well, in Genesis 1, Genesis 3 and 5, they have, these begot sections. So you have, these are the children of so-and-so, and they go through all the children. Here, we started with a story about stealing coats and about brothers and jealousy. Where are the children? Right? It's supposed to be the line. It's supposed to be the toldot, the eladim, the children of Jacob. And yet all we have is something about Joseph. And Joseph's not the only child. There are 10 other children before him. So we've got a problem. So let's take a look at Rashi. You want to continue, Drew?
These are the progeny of Jacob, and these are an account of the generations of Jacob. These are their settlements and the events that happened to them until they formed a permanent settlement.
So in other words, what is toldot from the word yeled, children? What does it mean? Not the children, but the account of the generations. Anything, right? The word toldot in later Hebrew, because of the question in this verse, the word toldot became the word for history, right? So it is the generations of Jacob, but in terms of the broader story of Jacob. We'll tell his lineage, but we're more interested in the broader story. Go ahead.
Noah.
Also, right.
Here, the offspring that he was a flock tender of the flocks. Yeah, it was his.
Joseph. No, wait a second.
And Joseph. Noah was a righteous man. That's not a generation. His deeds were his generation.
Good.
This is his deeds.
Right, but let's just point out. Let's unpack what Dr. Joe was pointing out. That whereas in Noah it says, what are the generations? The generations are his righteous. Noah is righteous. The generation of Noah is that Noah is righteous. Here, the generation of Jacob is that Joseph tends the flock.
Yes.
Right. So we've got another problem. Okay, continue.
The first cause is found in the narrative, Joseph being 17 years old, etc. Through this incident that it came about that they went down to Egypt.
Now, what are the causes? The first cause, the Siba Rishonah, is Joseph. The whole problem is Joseph. If you want to know the whole story, it all starts with Joseph. Any problem we have, any story we're going to tell, it's all about Joseph. Go ahead.
This is the real explanation of the text, and in it each statement finds its proper setting.
So if my job is only to come and give the simple meaning, that's the simple meaning. So he should stop there. But go ahead. What does he do? He says,
The Midrash explains that by the words, these are the progeny of Jacob, Joseph.
No, notice now he's translated this other translation that I picked up of online. Says progeny. That the word toldot means progeny. It's hard to know what to translate. Go on.
Scripture regards all Jacob's sons as secondary to Joseph for several reasons. First, the whole purpose of Jacob in working for Laban was only for Rachel, Joseph's mother, and all of his children were born only in consequence of this. Then again, Joseph's facial features bore a striking resemblance to those of Jacob. Further, whatever happened to Jacob...
Well, how do we know that? How do we know that his face is just like Jacob? It's a Midrash. And how does the Midrash know it?
From that line?
Yes, from that line, because it says...
This is the progeny of
Jacob, Joseph. Jacob, Joseph, right. Joseph, it is the same as Noah. These are generations of Noah. These are generations of Jacob, Joseph. Because Joseph is the same as Jacob. Go ahead. Further,
what happened to Jacob happened to Joseph. The one was hated, the other was hated. In the case of the one, his brother wished to kill him. So too, in the case of the other, his brethren wished to kill him. Many such similarities are pointed out in Genesis.
Right. So this here he's telling you an interesting thing. I'm telling you these similarities. There are other similarities there in Genesis Rabbah. And that's a general feature of Rashi. There are many midrashim. I'll give you this one which fits in best. We'll see this later. He selects midrashim. He's an anthologizer. He picks certain midrashim, and the question is, why those? So there are two basic ways of looking at this Rashi. Rashi says, I'm here to explain the simple text and things which fit in well with the Midrash. So then we took an example. And we said, here's a verse. It says, this is a simple meaning. This is all the stuff that happened to Jacob, and it all starts with Joseph. Then he says, and the Midrash. So according to his stated purpose, why is he quoting this Midrash?
Simple means not really working out too well.
Right. What?
Creative launch.
Right, he's got a launch. He's got a launching pad for the Midrash. What's the launching pad? What are the two words? Right. The Jacob Joseph problem launches him into this Midrash. That it's not just that. Now, another way to look at it would be that he brought the simple meaning. Then he's also telling you Midrash. He's telling you, but that's not my purpose. You can look it up there. I'm just telling you a few other Midrashim. It's cute, but this is the simple meaning. I already told you this is the simple meaning. What are you more inclined to? Do you think that he's bringing the Midrash only to answer the questions, or is he bringing the Midrash because it's an alternate world, an alternate? Does it seem like it's well based in the verse?
The question was about Abraham and Yitzhak. Was he really his son? Because Abimelech, I think. Mm-hmm. So I think that was Rashi's commentary on Abraham and Yitzhak, was that their names put together. So maybe Rashi's saying again here too. It might have been a question. Yaakov had so many wives, and so who was who? So we want to make sure Yaakov goes with Yosef.
Is this your own interpretation, or are you saying it in Rashi?
I'm saying maybe that's why Rashi's bringing it again here, like he did with Abraham and Yitzhak, to say if you had a doubt about whose father was whose son, I'm just going to shore it up here and tell you this one belongs with this one.
I would say, right, I think, right, there is a Rashi about Avraham, Holida, Yitzchak. The generations of Avraham are that Avraham gave birth to Yitzchak. And the question was, people questioned his lineage because his parents were so old. Here, I would say, maybe he's saying, who is the real son? The question immediately answers, this story foreshadows everything. It starts off with one word, the real son is Joseph, period, end of report, before we even get started. That's good. So, I think you can see here that you could certainly make the argument that it's not that Rashi has two realms. There is the simple meaning, and then there's the Midrash. But rather that there's a simple meaning, and then he also has an opening within the text, a question within the text that opens for the Midrash. This simple reading won't answer it. If we wonder, why does it say that the generations of Jacob are Joseph? We don't know that they look alike. Only the Midrash knows that. They fill in the gaps. They have this tradition, perhaps. So they can fill in that gap. I can't. The simple meaning can't. So in the end, so let's say that that's true. He gave what he said was the simple meaning. That we're giving the beginning of the story. Then he also said that it says Jacob Joseph because they have very similar lives, similar looks. And Joseph is the whole purpose of Jacob's sojourn and all that. So in the end, do you have one interpretation or two interpretations? How about of the word toldot? These are the generations.
Either it means story or it means children.
Right.
It's almost as if he's not happy with his first explanation. Otherwise, why would he bring another one?
Right. Does the second one replace the first one? Is it working in tandem and side by side? Or is the first one answering the question of what does toldot mean? What are the generations? The second, the Midrash, is dealing with the question of Jacob Joseph. But Jacob Joseph is also the toldot question. The toldot question is, how could you say the generations of Jacob are simply Joseph? So he gives an answer. Can we still stick with the first interpretation? That the toldot means these are the this is the story. Well, why is Joseph the story? Oh, Joseph is the story because Joseph is the main son. Joseph is the same as Jacob. It could all come together. So we have Rashi as someone who is interested in the simple text. He also is going to use Midrashim which fit in. Good. Now we find out that there's Rashbam, his grandson, becomes a fanatic for simple meaning. Now let me ask you a question. Rashi's a traditional Jew. A little history. He grows up in the boondocks, Treves, Troyes. It's not a big Jewish city. There's no yeshivas or anything. His father maybe learned it a little bit, maybe not. His name is Yitzchak. He goes to New York. He goes to the big city. He goes to Worms and Spire, There they got the big boys, and all kinds of big rabbis. He learns through three different Yitzchak, he's got 2-3 rabbis there, and he learns the entire Talmud the way they taught it, and then he writes his own commentary to expound on what they taught him through that the entire Talmud. They probably teach him through Chumash and Midrash also. They probably went through the Midrash Rabbah, the collections. So why all of a sudden does he create this new field called the simple meaning of the text? It's not Jewish. I mean, the Jewish way to read it is with the Midrash and the Talmud. What's he doing? So there's a theory that it's, although we don't have Rashi deeply engaged with local Christians, but that there's a certain pressure in the air. Of course, there's the Crusaders in the air too during his lifetime. He lives from 1040 to 1105. In 1097, there's a major crusade that destroys the entire community, Spire and Worms, which then regroup. But there's certainly a lot of pressure from Christians, and one of the questions is, can we respond to Christian questions? So the problem was, if we only read the Torah through Midrash, and they only read the Torah through Christian Midrash, so it's your Midrash against my Midrash, and we're in big trouble. But if I'm a good philologist, and I'm a good simple reading of the text, and I can read the text simply, then I have an upper hand with the Christians. We know that the simple reading of the text is going to favor its Jewish reading and not the Christian interpretation. So the evidence of Christian influence and pressure is more deeply found with Rashbam, his grandson. Rashbam often says, when I was lecturing to the Christians in such and such a city, he talks about his interactions. Rashi, we can only guess. In any event, so it's interesting to note that he was beginning to create this field called simple meaning. So his grandson was his great devotee. He studied literally in front of him. He taught him, tractates and tractates of the Talmud, and Rashbam becomes a little Rashi, a little Talmud commentator, and he creates his own commentary on the Chumash. And look what he says about the relationship of his commentary on the Chumash versus his grandfather's. Who would like to read that for us? Rashbam, Rashi's grandson's report about Rashi's commentary. Who wants to read that? Anybody? Shannon?
Even Rashi, the father of my mother, set his part to explain the plain meaning of the text. Even my grandfather Shlomo was my adherent of the school. I had an argument with him on that account, in which he admitted that he would make new commentaries according to the plain meanings that arise each day.
So this is how this passage is often understood. Rashi says, I'm only here to explain the simple meaning. And as we just saw, he often digresses into Midrash. So his grandson says, Grandpa, what would you say in German? I don't know, in French. He says, you're telling me that you're the simple meaning, but you're always going to Midrash. We're going to learn later that a high percentage of the commentary is all Midrash. I don't understand. You've got all this Midrash. Can't you give the simple meanings? He says, you're right, my grandson, you're right. If I had time, I'd rewrite the whole thing and get more into the simple meaning of the text. Right? So according to this reportage, right, Rashi's whole purpose of the commentary is one thing. What's that? Simple meaning. That's what Rashi's there to do. Did Rashi stick to it? No, Rashi failed. Who's going to be the great champion who's going to fix it? Rashbam. How many people study Rashbam? Not that many. And he did. He was a real stickler. Simple meaning of the text. He critiques every time Rashi digresses, and he doesn't allow for any digression. You have to stick the simple meaning. So if his commentary is not sufficiently according to the plain meaning, then what is it? What is it? Could someone just ask the people to maybe have their conversation somewhere else? It's a little disturbing. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes.
He's trying to be his son.
Oh yes. Okay. Yeah, a word about Rashi and daughters. Rashi doesn't have sons. He only has 2 daughters. The one daughter has a lot of sons, and they're all become the Tosfot school that comment on the Talmud. Rashbam being the oldest, Ratam being one of the younger. And then they have one sister. All these brothers have one sister. That sister has a son who becomes the editor of Tosfot, Yitzchak HaZaken, and that son has another son, and there's about 6 generations of commentators on the Talmud, Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Shmuel. But 2 of the lines go through sisters and daughters. The daughters play a prominent role in transmitting the tradition. Okay, moving along. So the question is, does Rashi ever slip into Midrash for Midrash's sake? Does Rashi ever get so far afield from his purpose that sometimes he's just giving Midrash? He's just doing Midrash. So there are many super commentaries on Rashi. Lots and lots of super commentaries. Commentaries on Rashi's commentary. Because it spawned this whole literature. What does he mean? What's Rashi's question? What's bothering Rashi? And all these different questions. How could he say that? It's not the simple meaning. So here are 2 commentaries. Eliyahu Mizrahi being very famous. Ber Yitzchak less so. And what does Eliyahu Mizrahi say about the Midrash? About Rashi's relationship with Midrash? What does he say? Barbara? Rabbi Eliyahu Mizrahi? Turkish Jew in the 15th, 16th century. What does he say?
Where we can make Midrash?
Yes.
Based on the plain meaning of make Midrash. And where we can't, we don't.
Right. So if we can get away with it, we're going to do it. Meaning, when can you?
When you can.
What's the basis for it? What's the basis for it? When you have, within the text, a... plain meaning. No, if you have the plain meaning, then you're good. But if you don't have the plain meaning, when you're stuck, you have a problem in the text, then you have an oddity in the text, even a word that we don't usually encounter, then you could jump off into Midrash. So Eliyahu Mizrahi is a little bit permissive in allowing us to imagine that Rashi often makes Midrash if he can. Ber Yitzchak is a stickler. What does he say? Jason?
He says, the story is for itself, but the way of our sages of blessed memories to raise all that they can raise, for through the story they can tell us good lessons.
Oh, I'm sorry, this is, we'll see Rabbi Pardo. I'm sorry. Well, let's just, for contrast, let's just turn to the next page for a second. Yeah. Look at Rabbi Pardo.
Okay. It is known that the way of Rashi is commentaries to bring matters of Agadah only if it is needed to explain the verse, and that which can settle the verse on its heel and nothing else.
There's no random midrash in this book. Okay? Here's tonight's, here's the cutting edge of tonight. Is Rashi this sort of nice guy who, is this sweet rabbi who, he says he wants to give the simple meaning of the text, and he's going to have this new radical thing of the simple meaning of the text, but he just loves midrash. He loves it so much. He's always going to tell you midrash. Oh, by the way, I got to tell you, there's a really good midrash. Or does Rashi have sort of a methodology, and he sticks with it, and he's consistent? That's the question for tonight. So the Rabbi Eliyahu Mizrahi said what? Which one? Version 1 or version 2? Version 1. He's a cute guy. He likes makes up midrash. He throws in midrash whenever he can. Right, Pardo? Version 2. He's a stickler for the meaning. They're very comment.
So this might be the Ashkenazi, but wasn't the Sphard-Beth way that if you couldn't understand something, you could read it as an allegory? Like you didn't have to bring midrash, you would bring allegory if it didn't line up with reason or if there was something. You would find a reason. Is that the difference that you think between Sphard-Beth? Maybe Sajigon and like Rashi. Right. Rashi's bringing something more creative in.
Right. The philosophical commentators are more comfortable with allegory. Yes, a different time. Yeah. Some people say that midrash doesn't have as much allegory as you would think. You would think midrash would be allegory, but not as much.
Yeah. It's really just telling the story.
Right.
Keeping the story.
Occasionally they have allegory. Okay. What about then? Then there's another kind of an idea which is going to be very key for tonight's discussion. We call tonight's discussion the lens of meaning. So look what Ber Yitzchak and Nechama Leibovich have to say about Rashi. Ber Yitzchak, Jason, you want to continue?
The story is for itself, but the way of our sages of blessed memories to raise all that they can raise, for through the story they can tell us of good lessons.
Yes. So, it's my own clunky translation. With the simple meaning of the text, if you know what the words mean, then, like Barbara said, So when you're if you know what the words mean, you tell us what the words mean, and you can give an explanation. Then that's the simple meaning of the text. You're sort of done. So the story is itself, but there's also a lesson that you can get from the story. Now you see, if you're a stickler if you say that Rashi's only here to give a simple meaning of the text, then when Rashi says, and the meaning of this story, the lesson that this tells is such and such, are you happy? No. You say, wait, how does this lesson help explain the simple meaning of the text? He says, wait. Says Rabbi the Ber Yitzchak Yaakov. He says, wait, there's a simple meaning of the text. That's like, what does the story say? And then it is also reasonable to do what the sages did, which is to raise whatever you can raise issues that you can raise, because there are always good lessons that you can find from the text. That's not diverging. It's not digressing. Right? There are some intellectuals who, if you go to a class, you know, okay, let's go to a parsha class, and instead of telling you what the parsha is about, they give you preaching, right? So then you say, preaching. I want to learn Chumash, and you're giving me preaching. So he says, well, if the story is the story, but then if there's some preaching that can come from the story, that's also there. I mean, it's latent in the text. So this is an interesting question. Moving along to Challah Language. If you're not familiar with Challah Language, her blue books are found in the corner there, and she was very revolutionary person. She was a model of Western Berlin education pre-war, and also a great Torah scholar, and also a woman, and also with great interest in all the commentaries, and a special interest in Rashi. Yes?
And sometimes he brought Midrashim of the sages, even if it was not from the language of the verse, just to teach a lesson or ethical preaching based on the idea that wherever we can make Midrash, we do.
So he picking up on the Rabbi Joel M Mizrahi, whenever we can make Midrash, we do. It's a Talmudic expression. When you can make Midrash, you do. But he says that sometimes it's not from the language. The lesson might not be from the language. You know, he might just say, the lesson of the story is, even though it's not directly in the words. Because if you were looking for the plain meaning of the text, you wouldn't have that lesson. The lesson is something that only comes from the Midrashic meaning. But he wants to preach certain lessons. So now we're allowing for him to go off the farm a little bit of a problem. Okay, now let's take a look at an example of a lesson from Genesis 1. Who would like to read that for us? Larissa?
And God said, Let us make man in our image after our likeness, and they shall rule over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the heaven, and over the animals, and over all the earth, and over all the creeping things that creep upon the earth. Rashi says, Let us make man, even though they, the angels, did not assist him in his creation, and there is an opportunity for the heretics to rebel, to misconstrue the plural as a basis for their heresies. Scripture did not hesitate to teach proper conduct and the trait of humility that a great person should consult with and receive permission from a smaller one. Had it been written, I shall make man, he would not have learned that he was speaking with his tribunal, but to himself. And the refutation to the heretics is written alongside it, i.e. in the following verse, and God created
the singular.
And it does not say, and they created.
In the plural. Right. So what's the problem in the text? Right. Who's he talking to? Right. Let us make man. Why is the verb in the plural? Let us make man. So, and his solution? He's talking to the angels, and what's the lesson? But after all, doesn't this open the Torah to heresy, that there are many gods, right? And the Christians would be happy with this, those who were Trinitarians, right? The lesson of humility. So here we learn two things. So Rashi is interested in, is he solving a question within the verse? Yes. Is he using a midrash to answer the question? Yes, only from midrash would you know these the heavenly tribunal. And is he giving us a lesson from the text? But does the lesson derive from the text itself, or is a lesson derived from a question that the rabbis had about the text? If you would ask a question, how could God write such a heretical thing that would speak in the plural as if there were many gods? So the answer is that humility is more important. From this, we have an important lesson about humility. And then if you ask Rashi, what's the purpose of the Torah? Based on this, can you extrapolate from here? And it's narrow.
Just the proper way to...
As opposed to? The lesson of behavior more important than the story. Good. What else? Lesson of behavior instead of what else? What's the Torah not that interested in?
Not interested in science or an exact description of creation. Here to tell a story.
Rashi says that elsewhere that the order of creation seems out of order because it's not here to tell us the order of creation. If you believe in evolution, Rashi is your man because he says the 7 days of creation are not to tell you the order of creation, but he's not interested in faith and theology. Now, he would say that whether Rashi is interested, we can't extrapolate from here. But Rashi would say that the Torah is not as interested in theology as it is in Midos, proper character development. And then you could also say that perhaps Rashi is here to develop our character, rather, as one of his major purposes, which he didn't tell us, that he's here to develop our character.
And like you said, the pressure from the Christians, he's answering that too.
Yes, it's true. All in one little Rashi. There's the response to the Christians as well. Good. Now, moving along to another lesson that Rashi learns, and let's see, does this lesson stem from the text, or is Rashi just can't resist to give a lesson? So who wants to read that? Genesis 37. Yes?
And when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of his brothers, they hated him so they could not speak peaceably to him. And Rashi, and they could not speak peaceably to him, from what is stated to their discredit, we may infer something to their credit. They did not speak one thing with their mouth, having another thing quite different in their hearts.
What would you call that? They didn't show any what?
Hypocrisy.
Duplicity, right? So is there a problem in the text that Rashi's coming to answer? They couldn't speak to him in peace. Is there a problem with that? Is that true? Is there a problem in saying? No, there's really no problem. So why does he have to say this? He wants to give lessons. So, although Rashi never told us, he's here to give us important lessons. And that's why a lot of people, let's say, the Cheder system in Eastern Europe was basically, you hit the kids over the head until they learn all the Rashis. That was the basic educational system. Why Rashi? Because all the important values and lessons were in the Rashi. And because he had this other purpose. And if you ask, why was there such a popular commentary? How popular was Rashi? Rashi was so popular that by the time you get to not so much the Ibn Ezra, but by the Ramban's time, less than 200 years later, every Sephardic Jew in Israel and in Spain, everybody in the whole Jewish world, they all have Rashi. He has so many copies of it. We don't even have the original because who cares about the original? There are just so many copies. It's the basis of the Ramban's, the major commentators. It's the basis of it. Ibn Ezra, we'll talk about next week. He kind of ignored Rashi, pretty much, but the Ramban took it very seriously, and he says how much he loves Rashi. He loves Rashi, and the Ramban is a strong influence in the Sephardic world. Another very strong influence is that the Code of Jewish Law says, you're really supposed to read the Aramaic official translation. It's printed in the art scroll right next to the text. The Aramaic translation, you're supposed to read that once, and the text you're supposed to read twice every week. But if you read Rashi instead of the Aramaic translation, it's good enough. So Rashi became the official Parshan Data, the official translation, replacing the Unkelos, which was said by the Talmud to be from Sinai, to be, so that's how popular it was. And part of the popularity, we could argue, is because he's reading it through the lens of meaning. He doesn't just want to explain the words. He's good at words. He can explain philology, and he tries to do cognates with other languages. Next week, Ibn Ezra will make fun of him. He's not very good at it, but he at least tries. He understands the syntax. He has grammar books that he uses from previous Ibn Janach, the grammar books that he's using. So he's a serious commentator. He works out the details. He's not just here to preach, but he's definitely here to trying to see the Bible through the lens of meaning. Comment. Yes.
In his mind, he was thinking of this, put capital F for Father, us and the other brothers we have.
Oh, interesting. That maybe God loved him more.
Us more than them, that's what they had.
Oh, in the Christians.
He lived with.
Right. The brothers. Right? We're always referred to as the brothers. Could be. Moving along. All right, so we see that the idea of learning lessons is often found. I don't have time for this one, but there's a remarkable story. Tamar is one of the great heroes. Tamar the prostitute is one of the great heroes in our Torah. Why? Because she's not really a prostitute. She's really just trying to make sure that her father-in-law performs levirate marriage. And then when he threatens he's preparing to have her burnt at the stake, she says, well, who are these? Whose signet and ring is this? I have a signet and ring. Ask Judah whose signet and ring this is, and then so if Judah's honest, he'll say, "Oh, that's the signet and ring of the prostitute." Wait a second, it's not the prostitute. It's Tamar just sent this signet. She must be the prostitute. It was Tamar. It's a levirate marriage. Oh, so if he's a nice guy, he'll say, "Okay, don't burn her." But if he's not a nice guy, he'll say, "Oh, that's embarrassing." So put that someplace else. And put his ring on, and she'll burn. So he says, I'd rather burn. I don't want to embarrass him. So this is he didn't make this up. This is a midrash, but the lesson that's taught is priceless. Now there are many other lessons in many other midrashim. He selects certain midrashim, and he provides those lessons. Let's move on to Exodus 17, another lesson that when Moses sat on a rock during the war, when Jews are fighting, you can't sit in comfort, you sit on a rock. Again, it's from the Talmud, but Rashi just, time after time, the lessons keep coming. Modesty again, Leviticus 14, leprosy, he sees within leprosy, how come the cure for leprosy is taking a cedar tree and a hyssop, which is some kind of little plant. He says because, page 5 at the top, the lofty tree is used, the cedar, because the plagues come as a punishment for haughtiness, and the lowly tree is the remedy for his haughtiness, is to become lowly. So, these are all, it's in the Midrash, it's in the Talmud, Arachi, but, time and again, Rashi makes sure that what you learn is values, character. He's looking for meaning in the text. Again, if we look at the top of page 5, is that a simple meaning question? Why do you have a cedar? Why do you have a worm or a hyssop? Is that a simple meaning question? It's the next level. It's a different level, right? It's a different level. The words mean what they say. The next level is, well, why do you have this? And time and again, he finds lessons that give us lessons. Story of Korach, they said Moses made an overture to the no-goodniks, and the no-goodniks said, we're not coming to discuss it with you. So Rashi says, you see from here that you should never hold a feud. If there's a feud, someone offers an olive branch, don't take it. Don't keep the feud. If you allow a feud to fester, it's your bad. Okay. So again, we would like to summarize so far. What have we said? What's the purpose of Rashi's commentary?
So,
You want to summarize what? It's a simple meaning, and meanings which can be, and meanings, midrashic meanings which can be learned from oddities in the text, in order to teach him more or less. That he's using the lens of meaning. His grandson was really far off. His grandson missed the whole point. He couldn't articulate, apparently. He didn't say to his grandson, "You're wrong, that's not what I'm doing." He did say, his stated purpose was to give a simple meaning. He may have seen himself in some ways as this great scholar of the simple meaning, in addition to a scholar of everything. He knows everything. But ultimately, at some unconscious or conscious level, he's there like every rabbi to preach and teach. And this comes to a very important educational question, which is, to what extent should classrooms be about the material, or are we teaching really values? Can a good history teacher just teach just the facts? Here's the history. Here's right. Even with lessons, this is what we learned from this era. Or does there have to be some sort of interaction with the reader where you're changing the reader? We're going to get to this more in this Emeth in our last week, but it's a question of what is a Rebbe. Is a Rebbe someone who gives a good shiur, a good class, or is a Rebbe someone who's trying to change the personality of the person being? So, this is a question. Now, let's look at a couple of scholars of Rashi and what they say about Rashi, having studied him extensively. Rabbi Moshe Aaron taught at my yeshiva in Klush and Chon Herzog. He taught at Bar Ilan. I think he was a student of Nechama Leibovich, that great woman teacher. Let's see what he has. So he wrote a whole treatise about Rashi. There are many books just about Rashi. Sarah Yafet has one. My cousin was a good student of hers. And Avram Grossman has a historical one. And there are lesser biographies. I'll quote more from one later. And you have the Professor Twito I had as a professor years ago. He has extensive articles, etc. So there's a lot of work has been done on trying to figure out this question we're dealing with tonight. What is the purpose of Rashi? Let's see what Professor Moshe Aaron, what did he have to say? Who would like to read that for us? Anybody? Would you like to read that? Professor Moshe Aaron, go ahead.
Professor Moshe
Aaron.
How did Rashi married to become so beloved in our nation? After all, 70% of what he said is called from the sages.
So here's a statistical fact: 70% of what he says is just straight out of the Talmud, straight out of the Midrash. So we have Rashi. The genius is not in the content, rather.
Which one's he selected?
The selection. Right, the selection. We'll see in a minute an example of that. Go ahead.
It is appropriate for all ages. A child of 5 can enjoy. The elders enjoy. Learn colors will dip things in it, and the masses lick their fingers with it.
This is my loose translation of the Hebrew. They enjoy. They get something. They get something out of it. Right. Go ahead.
This commentator knew not just to turn to our minds, to point out difficulties, and to solve them, and to find secrets of the Torah, but to turn to our imagination and our feelings to make us love the parasha, and to bring us to identity with the heroes as they are depicted by our sages. Okay. We get to know Abraham, the sick one, who is dedicated to kindness and hospitality. Isaac, who becomes blind from the smoke of the idolatrous incenses of his son Esau for wife. Jacob, who studied 14 years in the house of Shem, and ever to learn Torah, and Aaron, the priest whom everyone cried for for 30 days.
Right. So these are little midrashim that he mentions along the way, and this is how we get to know these characters through Rashi and through the midrashim. This is how he portrays them. There are other stories, but these are the stories that he tells best, and that's how a Jew is educated. Now, the next example is a very extreme example, one of the most extreme examples in his entire commentary, where we'll see if there is or isn't a problem in the text, and then from there he launches into giving 5 different homilies, some of which are not based on this text. I think he gives 4 homilies. Apparently in the Midrashic text there are even more homilies, and the question is, why does he give these homilies? So I don't have time to go through all of them, but let's just take a look at maybe the first and the last. Who would like to read that for us? First you have to read the text, which I have stapled onto your page. What's the text? Who would like to read the text?
Read.
Go ahead.
And when a person, without knowing it, sins in regard to any of the Lord's commandments about things not to be done, and then realizes his guilt, he shall be subject to punishment.
Wait a second. The English doesn't give the full translation. It says, and he didn't know. When it says he realizes his guilt, he says, well, he didn't know, and he was guilty, and he shall bear his sin. I guess the text is so difficult, the translator homogenized the meaning. Again, look at the Hebrew. The last 4 words, v'lo yada, he did not know. V'ashem, he was guilty. He had been guilty, but he didn't know when he committed it. Asavano, he will bear his sin, so he's going to have to bring some sacrifices. So, he didn't know, and he was guilty. What's the problem?
He can't be punished for it because of...
Right. So, Doctor, would you read for us the first homily? He's quoting various rabbis from various homilies. Go ahead.
And he does not discover that he is guilty and beareth his iniquity.
That's also a translation that's trying to cover up the problem in the text. He didn't know, he didn't discover that he's guilty. Well, no, it just says he didn't know. He didn't even know, he didn't know anything. But in any event, go ahead.
Rabbi Yosef, the Galilean, said, see, Scripture, God punishes him who has no sure knowledge that he has sinned, inasmuch as it requires him to be a guilt offering, to bring a guilt offering. How much the more does it follow that he will punish him who does know that he is sinning and yet willfully does it?
We're supposed to tremble when we read this. He didn't know, and he's guilty. So you say, wait a second, he didn't know he's guilty. Then what should we feel? We know, and then we're really, if we know, we're really guilty. So, does that answer a problem in the text?
No.
Oh, why not?
Because the problem that exists is why one is being punished if he didn't.
Oh, very good, very good. So it's just a lesson, but it doesn't answer the problem in the text. Right. It addresses it. It's, again, he jumps off the problem in the text. Very good. He doesn't answer it. He's just here to give you a lesson. Good. Since we're having a little fun with that, let's take another one.
Rabbi Yossi said, if you wish to know the reward prepared for the righteous, go and learn from the case of Adam Horashan, who was charged only with a negative command, not to eat from the tree of life, tree of knowledge, and who transgressed it. See how many kinds of death penalties were on this account decreed as a punishment against himself and all his descendants. Now, which measure is greater, that of good, of reward, or that of punishment? You must admit that it is that of reward.
For doing good deeds, we get more reward than we get punished for doing bad deeds. Go ahead.
Doesn't that contradict what the previous sentence said? Because there are how many kinds of death penalties on account of...
No. So now he's going to make an argument. If you get that many death penalties for just violating a negative, imagine how much reward you would get for doing a positive.
Okay.
If then
the measure of punishment is the lesser, Consider that if so many counts of death penalties were decreed as a punishment against himself and his descendants, surely, in the case of the measure of good, which is the greater one, if a person refrains from they become abominable, or how much more certain is it that he will acquire merit for himself and for his descendants and the descendants of his descendants until the end of all generations?
Right. So now this homily, does this homily come from this text? No. Is it right? Is it related to the point of someone who didn't know? No. Right. So there was this Jacob, the Rabbi Pardo that we read before, who says Rashi doesn't say anything unless it's part of the text. He tries. I read it on like someone else. I read a secondary source about it, and I read it inside. It's hard to know exactly what he's saying, but he tries somehow to claim that each one of these four homilies somehow answers the question in a better kind of way. So as Rabbi Pardo will claim that these homilies, although they seem to be digressing in a huge way from the text, he'll claim that there's still some jumping off point in the text. Each one answers a different type of question within the text. He's going to work hard to figure out this difficult Rashi, how it works within the thesis of the general idea of Rashi. And the other people will say, well, nice old man, and he's got, he loves Midrash and couldn't resist. Although you don't find something this large a digression where he's not selecting that much. Again, I was told, and I have a chance to look, but I was told that there are many other homilies that you can find in the Midrash. He only gave a few. So there is some selectivity here. And that's on that basis, Rabbi Pardo says there's got to be something tight about these particular things. But it certainly seems to point in the direction of Rashi, the looser version of Rashi, that Rashi is here to give meaningful preaching, even if it doesn't directly answer a question in the text. Okay. Yes.
Question. When he selects a midrash, are there conflicting midrashim on the same topic? So does he sanction?
Yes, I'll give you a classic example. That example is there's a debate why we sit in a sukkah. Is it because the Jews made sukkahs, or is it because God protected us in the clouds? Rashi says clouds.
Okay.
What gave him the right to do that? He's like the Rambam. He can decide, like a posek, a decisor, so he decides. But this is a difficult area of Jewish thinking to decide because it's not. This debate is which opinion was Rabbi Akiva. One of them was Rabbi Akiva. It seems that he's going against Rabbi Akiva, so it's a problem. But that's just an example where that has a lot of ramifications. Yes, Rashi picks, and like a decisor of Jewish law, it says it's this, not the other one. Another interesting use of Midrash I saw in one of the secondary literature. Never quite looked at it this way. You know the famous statement that love your neighbor as yourself. This is a great principle in the Torah. Who said that? Rabbi Akiva. It's similar to what Hillel said, but Rabbi Akiva said it. Those two characters often say the same thing. They're very similar. So Rashi says, love your neighbor as yourself. He says, this is a major principle in the Torah. He doesn't say Rabbi Akiva says it's a major principle. He just says, I'm telling you, I agree with that, Rabbi. This is a major principle in the Torah. Right, so, which is different. He's just quoting the Midrash. No, he's telling you what it is. He's talking to you, and he's telling you that it is a major principle. Going back to our point that he's more interested in the ethical points. Another interesting point about this, the ethical versus the spiritual. There's a verse that you should cling to God, walk in His ways. Again, we have a meditation class upstairs. I'm sure they would enjoy looking at that from a perspective of you cling to God. You close your eyes and you cling to God. Rashi takes classic Talmudic view, Sota 14, that you should walk in His ways means you should be kind like He is. So even verses that seem to point in a theological direction, he takes them as, of course, as many rabbis do as well, but Rashi being the quintessential Jew, he takes them as teachings for interpersonal relations. Okay. Finally, yes.
Can you leave us with the point that we never settled? Because it's still curious to understand why, if you didn't know you committed a sin, you're still responsible for that sin. So
right.
Do we have?
Well, you're not responsible in that you get punished. you're responsible and you should bring a sacrifice which will erase any sort of guilt that could be associated with it. We speak in the daily page of the Talmud these days, in Makot, there's an idea of, there's different levels of unintentional sin. Some unintentional sins are almost intentional. Some unintentional sins are so far removed from any kind of responsibility. But within the Rashi, does he answer the question? Let's see. In this Rashi.
Oh, it says, and then realizes his guilt after. So I think that's solved. Okay.
Well, no, that's the English translation trying to solve the problem.
Oh.
Well, the question is, what's his solution? The simple reading is simply, he didn't know and he's guilty. That's a simple translation. No one's going to translate that because it doesn't make sense. Yes, I think the last interpretation would help us. He says, based on, again, studying the daily Talmud these days, we're talking about the idea that if, let's say, you only need two witnesses. So let's say we gang up on that person over there, that person killed somebody. We're ganging up. We don't need Larissa to be part of our team, but we're going to take her into our team anyway. So the three of us are going to now say, assuming you could have male witnesses, a female witness. So we're going to team up, and we're going to say that he killed somebody. We're lying. So then they've proved that we were never there, we never saw it. So now we're all going to get punished. You say, wait a second, why is she going to get punished? We don't need her. All we need is us. I say, yeah, but when you join with the evil, you're punished. So I think maybe that's an answer. That the association with guilt is guilt. So there's an evil deed, and you're associated with it, not by intent, but by fact. You did it. So therefore, you're nitpal. You are secondarily. You're associated with it. You are. What's the translation? You become deputized to this sin. So certainly the person who actually did it, he's not really there. He says, an out-of-body experience. I was flailing my arms and something happened to happen. I didn't know what I was doing. But since there's an association with sin, there's some guilt there. That would be one possible way of squeezing that part of that Rashi into an answer. You know what I'm saying?
Okay. You think he might be implying that if you know you're sinning, there is no atonement. There is a way back. And that if you don't know, you should have known because you're not paying attention.
But start again. When you do
the people who sin intentionally,
right?
They can't do this.
Right. There is an idea that rarely are there any sacrifices for people who sinned on purpose.
And if you do sin unintentionally, it means you're not paying attention.
Yes.
You should have thought about this before you did.
That's why I talk about different levels of guilt. In other words, there's one person who was such an unintentional death, it's close to having no association with him at all. And there's other unintentional death where you could have checked the axe, make sure it was a little more firm. So you want to say that perhaps
keep the commandments.
You should pay more attention. You should have more knowledge. Yes. Good. Now, I did want to point out one more sort of random point. I apologize for its randomness, but one of Rashi's purposes in preaching to us is he wants to build Jewish esteem, Jewish self-esteem, because he knows it's at an all-time low. I mean, we're jumping out windows trying to avoid the Christian crusaders charging at us. So the Jewish pride is at an all-time low. So he often builds that up, sometimes with not the gentlest statements about other people, but more so where the idea over and over again in Genesis, he's saying that the world's created for us, for the Jewish people who are the Reshit, the first child of God and all that. So there is this didactic point which he makes over and again. One of the very first Rashis that Bereshit, but meaning for the firstborn, for his firstborn, for the Jews, the world was created. So I would read it with a historical eye. He's trying to build up the downtrodden Jew, and he succeeded for thousands of years. Let's turn to two last professors, one a rabbi, who tried to put together and piece together what Rashi's ultimate goal is. We'll start with Professor Twito. So one is an article Professor Twito wrote after he was my professor 30 years ago, and one, a citation of what I remember him saying, if I'm not mistaken, 30 years ago. So what did he say 30 years ago? Professor Elazar Twito? Larissa, would you name?
It seems that according to Rashi...
No, before that. I recall.
All I'm saying in class, Rashi's method is that he explains the simple explanation, except when the Midrash is just so good that he cannot resist.
After many years, he then changed his opinion and wrote a more sophisticated article in which he said the following. Continue.
It seems that according to Rashi, the purpose of the Torah in showing the motivations of God and how he runs the world is to educate people to proper social behavior in life. The Torah reveals some of the godliness not to edify our spiritual world or to take us to higher Sphard-Beth levels, but to establish the image of a proper humanity, to bring about healthy human relations. In a choice between preventing theological problems and the chance to implant educational values in humanity, the verses do not hesitate. He will educate people to behave well and will overlook the theological dangers of it. For the Torah worries about the proper human relations before it worries about proper beliefs. I.e., God says, let us make man to teach modesty, despite the possible implication of duality.
In summary
of our study, it seems that one can assert that according to Rashi, the main message overtly of the Torah is not theological but didactic.
So, over and again, Rashi is trying to teach us how to be and how to live. We'd like to conclude with Chaim Pearl, who's just wrote a nice little monograph about Rashi, and I thought this kind of nailed it pretty well.
He knew his readers, and he understood quite rightly that for many of them, the Agadah was more attractive than the dry Pshat. His natural feeling for Drush proved to his readers that the Bible record was a warm and intensely human document, and in the course of time, the masses of the people who read Rashi embraced his commentaries all the more enthusiastically, precisely because of the prominence of Drush.
In other words, instead of becoming an academic, he became a rabbi. So, in other words, Rashi had two ways to go. He could have said, I have an important project. I want to show the simple meaning. I've got grammar books. I understand syntax. I'm going to create a whole new grammar. There was work in grammar that hadn't been done, and he worked on it. And he wasn't making great achievements, but he had what to say, and he could have stopped there. And he could have also stopped as, let's say, an anthologizer. But he decided that, and this is in classic rabbinic fashion, but he did it best. Did it better than Ibn Ezra, one might argue. People don't enjoy studying Ibn Ezra as much. He's not the beloved commentator. He's a beloved poet, a beloved singer, character, but not the beloved commentator. But Rashi, the word beloved and Rashi go well together. There's some sort of a love affair between the Jewish people and Rashi, because he is our teacher. He imbues us with these values. And although he had that mission to give the simple meaning, he didn't stop there. And even with the simple meaning, one of his goals was to give a deeper meaning. So I want to claim that the lens of Rashi was the lens of meaning, that he's looking at the text for what lessons we can glean from it. And some of these analyzers of Rashi would say, particularly in the realm of the interpersonal, how can we be better human beings? By reading. We're going to get, in the last week, we'll get to the Sfas Emes and Hasidim, who are always interested in Al Derech Havoda, meaning, here's a biblical story, how does this help me be a better person, a better Jew? And Rashi, I think, succeeded. I don't know if he succeeded in giving the simple meaning of the text. That's a big question. But he did succeed in imbuing Jewish values and becoming the handbook of Jewish values for Jewish children and adults, and in that sense, a great, great success. So in coming weeks, we'll stay tuned for the lens of truth. Interesting, what is Ibn Ezra is going to go in a different direction than what we saw this week, very much different, more academic. The broad lens, we've been looking at a commentator who's looking at every verse. What happens when someone has a view of the whole Tanakh and the whole book and the whole. So let's take the Ramban in terms of that, and the lens of association. We're going to see some clever associations within the Sphard-Beth, how he dazzled crowds with interesting associations, and also we're going to go back to this idea of the lens of meaning and an interesting new take on that for the final session.